movement poets. It emerged in the 1950s in UK. The term was coined by J.D. Scott, who was the editor of The Spectator at that time. Okay, so they wrote the new movement of the 50s. Okay, so there was a movement which emerged during the 1950s, and it was J.D. Scott who gave it this term, this name, movement poets. Most of the poets belonging to this school were educated in Cambridge and Oxford. They were highly English in outlook. They were highly British in outlook, and they reacted against the romanticism, modernism, and symbolism of the previous ages. Okay, they did not accept romanticism or the writing styles of Yeats and Pound. They did not accept symbolism or modernism. Okay, now it was a reaction against the new apocalyptics who espoused the romantic tradition and the previous traditions. The movement poets were against modernism. They were against any kind of experimentation and romanticism. Okay. Now, there was this angry group called the Angry Young Men, including Kingsley Amis, John Osborne, and so on. They were very disillusioned with the traditional social order. They were working class poets and they were unhappy with the opportunities that they received. They were unhappy with the material culture in which they lived. They saw reality for what reality was. Okay, so in the poetry of the movement poets, you can see that social reality is often highlighted. The movement poets influenced Kingsley Amis, John Osborne, and such other writers. Now, movement poets also, like the poets of the previous generation, they also had a nostalgia for the old England. Like I said, they were focused on rural England. They were focused on, say, the time period of Wordsworth, where there is a field and there is a woman reaping the harvest, and there is a farmer and there are sheep. Okay, so they harked back to this old rural England, and they focused on an English identity. They refused to accommodate anything other than the English culture, the English landscape, the English worldview. Okay, but they focused on everyday life and simple subjects like the romanticists. Okay, and they focused on common everyday incidents. Okay, and they criticized the new social order. Okay, they said that the new system is very disintegrating. The new system does not give any opportunities. The new system in England is morally decadent. Okay, so they opposed the moral system, the existing moral systems, and harked back to the old period. Okay. Now, it was a very big advantage of this kind of writing was that they wrote directly. Okay, and they did not use many symbols. Okay, they did not use obscure, incomprehensible language. Okay, so as a result, it was highly accessible to the common people. The common people found it very easy to read it because the poems talked about their daily life. Okay, and there was a direct relationship between the poet and the reader. Okay, the poet was speaking through the poem and the reader could understand it very easily. There was not much of images and symbols and all that. Everything was very presented in a very simple manner. Besides, they used very little metaphors and allusions. When do we not understand the text? We don't understand something when there are too many symbols, when there are too many allusions to outside text. Okay, but then this was self-sufficient. So people found the ordinary diction, the colloquial language, and the simple grammar easy to understand. Besides, it was very disciplined. It was not experimental in that sense, where they write about everything. They start off with a lamb biryani kind of writing was not there. So it was very patterned, it was very formal and structured, and it was very rational. They did not talk about abstract ideas. So it appealed to the common people. Okay, they used irony, and the writing was very argumentative. They tried to assert a point, and sometimes they used poetic utterances in an understated manner. They said it in a very subtle manner. Okay, and they used irony as a means of opposing existing structures. Okay. Now, two major works are produced belonging to this genre: Poets of the 1950s, edited by Enright, and New Lines, edited by Robert Conquest. These two works contain And these are anthologies containing poems belonging to this school. Okay. Now, major poets. These are two people who we have heard of: Kingsley Amis and Philip Larkin. Okay, their works like The Whitsun Weddings by Larkin, Church Going Thoughts, and Bright November and Ivan's Country by Kingsley Amis, they belong to the Neo Formalist school. Then we have Thom Gunn. Then we have Elizabeth Jennings, a very prominent poet who wrote about poems like A Bird in the House, A Way of Looking, Timely Issues, and such other poems. We have John Wayne, we have John Holloway, Robert Conquest, Enright, who wrote the anthology. Conquest and Enright wrote anthologies. All these people were also poets. There is there are a few lines from Church Going by Philip Larkin. Once I'm sure there's nothing going on, I step inside, letting the door thud shut. Another church, matting, seats in stone, and little books sprawling, some flowers cut for Sunday, brownish now, some brass and stuck up at the holy end, the small neat organ, and a tense, musty, unignorable silence. Okay, so there are references to a church, a typically English church. So if you read their poems, you will have to term most of the scenes as typically English. Okay, so this was a major feature of the new formalist school, but it was criticized for glorifying England. England was first of all an imperialist power, and these people were giving overimportance to England and pastoral rural England. And it was a kind of narrow-minded provincialism. They focused only on their land, their culture, and they promoted it as something huge and glorious, you know. And you must remember that these were Oxbridge boys, people educated in Oxford and Cambridge. So they could never really come down to the level of the common people or people in colonized nations. They could not associate with the black people. They could not associate with the subalternized people. Okay, they just wrote about elite stuff. They were highly elitist. Okay, and they were predominantly white poets. Okay, there was an obsession with whiteness and heterosexual and male dominated. They did not. They failed. The group contained only men, and that too heterosexual men. So it was highly mainstream and failed to accommodate any kind of difference, any kind of transgression. Okay. Now, Kingsley Amis himself said that terming this a movement is stupid. But still, you know, because of these anthologies, this movement was, you know, formally considered a movement. Although in many ways it was an imitation of the of various other old schools like Romanticism. So with this, we come to the conclusion. Okay, besides this, we have the Beat generation. We discussed all this. We discussed the Black Arts movements and confessional poetry, spiralism, new wave science fiction, all this. Apart from these, we have other things also which you might have listened to in the previous lecture, like dub poetry, theatre of cruelty, Beat generation, and so on, kitchen sink realism. Okay, now postmodernism still has not left the age, left literature or the arts. We are living in a period where we are wondering whether postmodernism is dead. This is a question that is much debated even today. Okay, some people say there is something called the postmodern age. Some people say there is transmodernism. Some people say there is metamodernism. But we need to think about, we need to interrogate why these terms did not gain much parlance. Okay, people like Acker, okay, Timotheus Vermilion and Robin Van Den Acker, they talked about metamodernism, okay, which is somewhere in between modernism and postmodernism, and digimodernism, okay, which incorporates elements from technology. Okay, digimodernism says that ours is a highly mediatized culture where technology mediates everything, and as such life becomes shallow. Okay, now all these terms were coined, but none of them gained prominence. Okay, some of them, other movements like alter modernism was used to in the field of the visual arts like painting and architecture. Okay, so although innumerable terms came, none of them have gained any kind of much of scholarly attention. Okay, so we need to wonder whether we are still living in the postmodern age or have we moved beyond it? And if we have moved beyond it, where are we now? All right. So that is it about the lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Minu, for a wonderful lecture. We thoroughly enjoyed your lecture for discussing in details about the various aspects, the characteristics, the writers, the works of the lecture. It's already late, so we might take one or two questions, if any. Please raise your hand if you want to. Agnimitra Roy has asked a question. Are we in an age embracing new wave sci-fi or having a reaction against it, or a mixture of both? In one side, we have Dune and sequel to Blade Runner, which basically are products of new wave sci-fi. And on the other hand, we have Interstellar, which is scientifically very sound since it used images of black hole that came to be true as photographed recently. So what would you like to put across? Dr. Minu. I hope I'm audible to you.
Yes, you are audible. Actually, I got a call. Is embracing new wave science fiction or having a reaction against it, or a mixture of both? I think, see, new wave, in my opinion, new wave science fiction and the old science fiction, both are more or less the same. The only distinction we can say is, in old wave science fiction, they focused mostly on aliens and planets, and they focused on space as such. But in new wave science fiction, we focus on subjectivity, human subjectivity, and the impact of this on the society. Now, when we say its impact on the society and on the human being, we must also remember that even Frankenstein, which was written so long, far away, talked about the impact of technology on human life. Okay, so I personally,
so sorry,
it's
please carry on.
more or less, old wine in new bottle. So yes, we are in an age where we are mixing both. Like you said, we have movies which are totally focused on space and not on the workings of the human mind. But we also have works that mix both. So yes, it's a mixture of both. If you actually believe that both things are different, then we can say that currently, there's a mixture of both. But I believe that it's basically the same thing. There's not much of a difference.
Thank you. Any other question? You can raise your hand. Oh, they are thanking you for your wonderful lecture.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so with that, I think we come to the end of this very enriching and engaging session. Thank you, Dr. Minu, for your efforts that you have put in for this lecture, and hope to see you in the near future. Thank you so much. Please take care. Good night.
Thank you.